Hello and welcome back to another episode of Surrounded by Bourbon with me, Phil Crawford, aka Causeway Whiskey. This is episode 21 and today we are doing a Bushmills face-off. We have the Bushmills original white label blend and also the Bushmills white label Prohibition Recipe. So, Bushmills Distillery. We're back in Ireland, in County Antrim in the north of Ireland. This was my local distillery. It was 9 miles from my hometown of Coleraine. And weirdly, it didn't really play a big part of my whiskey journey until I was probably in my 20s. In fact, I didn't even, as a young kid, even put together the fact that in a off-license or liquor store, if I had accompanied my parents in, you would have seen bottles of Bushmills alongside bottles of Jameson, and I didn't even put really two and two together that this stuff was produced in the village of Bushmills, which, as I say, was only 9 miles away. As I say in my previous videos, my whiskey journey actually ironically started with Jack Daniels and Coke, and then from there I started exploring, and that's when I became aware really of Bushmills. And in fact, I don't think I actually even visited the distillery until around 2005 and 2006. So shame on me. Anyway, I will probably go more into depth about Bushmills at some other point in a video because we have two to compare here. But they do make a lot about the fact that they're the oldest licensed distillery in the world. You will see on the bottles they have a license to distill from 1608, some embossed on the bottle here as well, proudly. It's a little bit of marketing from the Diageo era. Previous bottlings used to have 1784 on the bottles, but we'll get into that in another video. The white label is their entry-level blend. Interestingly, the thing about Bushmills is that they have both blended whiskies and single malts under the Bushmills name, which under the Scotch Whisky Technical File, that wouldn't be allowed because it's a bit confusing that you can have a blend and a single malt from the same distillery. But it's allowed in Ireland. In Scotland, the malt distillery or the grain distillery would have to be named, and then you'd have to come up with a different name for the blend that you've made with those products. And so yeah, this is the entry level of Bushmills. Bushmills used to be owned by IDL, Irish Distillers, who also own Jameson, and so Bushmills was also marketed as a smooth whiskey back in the day. So this is probably their lightest expression in the range. It is a 50-50 blend of Bushmills single malt and a grain whiskey from Middleton Distillery down there in Cork, or in Middleton I should say, County Cork. A grain whiskey that is specially distilled for Bushmills by the guys down there in Middleton. I'm not sure how much longer that will go on for, as Bushmills are now owned by Jose Cuervo, and so the IDL link has, well, it's been severed for a while, but there is talk that Bushmills will actually be building their own grain distillery. So yeah, it's 50-50 blend of Bushmills malt, grain from Middleton. There's bourbon and sherry maturation, although it is predominantly bourbon cask maturation, and this is around 5 years old. The second whiskey that we have here is the white label Prohibition Recipe. When this came out, I thought it was a bit of just marketing guff. Didn't really think too much more about it because of the tie-in with kind of Peaky Blinders, because we have the Shelby Company Limited, Thomas Shelby of Peaky Blinders fame. Now, this is essentially the same liquid, a 50-50 blend of malt and grain. The difference is that this is only bourbon cask matured, and there's two other major differences. The fact is that this is non-chill filtered, and it's also 46% ABV, and I believe although it doesn't say anywhere on the label, but by looking at it, I think it is also natural colour. So besides the extra ABV, what's the crack with the whole non-chill filtration thing? So let's get into what chill filtration is. So below 46% ABV or 92% proof, whiskey when it is chilled or when you put an ice cube in has a tendency to go cloudy. The dreaded Scotch mist, as some people will call it. And a lot of producers don't really like this effect, especially on their high volume products, such as the original white label. Because to the casual consumer, if the whiskey goes cloudy, then that may indicate a defect, or it just doesn't look very nice. It's not visually very appealing to them. When actually, in fact, it is just a natural phenomenon, which basically the fatty acids and the oils that are held within the whiskey, under those chilled conditions, they actually coagulate, and that's what causes the cloudy phenomenon. Now, to negate this problem, a lot of producers with whiskies that are 43% or 40% ABV, so 86 proof, 80 proof, they use a process called chill filtration, which is where they quickly chill the whiskey before it's bottled, anywhere between minus 10 degrees Celsius or 14 Fahrenheit and 4 degrees Celsius or 39 Fahrenheit. And then they push the liquid through a barrier filter, on a fine filter. And that way they catch all the coagulated fatty oils and acids, and they leave a nicer, clearer liquid that looks much better on the shelf to the casual consumer. Why is this an issue? Well, critics, including myself, would kind of argue that whenever you remove those oils and the fatty acids, you're actually removing texture in the mouthfeel, and you're also removing aromas and flavors, so it's actually detrimental to the product. Hence today why we are doing this little tete-a-tete with these two Bushmills, and I just thought it'd be a fun experiment to see whether we can actually notice a difference. So without further ado, let us get into the tasting. And so first of all, I am going to nose the Bushmills original. So straight away, the grain component is the bit that kind of comes forward the first. So there's smells like a florist's shop, and there's sort of like carnations in there. There's pear. There's also a little lemon floor cleaner. There's definitely banana. There's honeydew melon in there as well. There's vanilla and just a light amount of spice and a little touch of hazelnut. So let's compare what we get with the non-chill filtered expression and the 46% Prohibition Recipe. So funnily enough, this time it feels as though the malt is speaking a little more. So we're getting creme brulee, the banana's there again. There's honey, there's flapjacks, some ripe red apples as well. There's some marshmallow in there, along with nutmeg and clementines. And again, just a nice subtle oakiness as well, just in the background. But definitely this feels a little more assertive, and definitely highlights the malt aspect a little more. The floral nature of the grain whiskey is not coming out quite so much. So let's go for a taste. I don't know if you can see this as well, but you know, there's fairly thin, quick legs on this. It's not really holding the glass too well. Okay, so like the legs, this is a little bit of a thin mouthfeel. And funnily enough, even though this is marketed as being smooth, I would say it's a little hot and spicy on arrival. Think of like a cold version of a hot toddy. So there's cinnamon, there's clove there, there's a definite alcohol kick. There's a bit of pepper, some oak. The vanilla's there again. There's some apple in there as well. But beyond that, there's not a huge amount more going on. Yeah, I think the cold hot toddy kind of nailed that one for me. It's I guess there's a little touch of lemon in there. Finish wise, I have to say it is definitely short. It is a little astringent. It definitely does dry out the back of your palate a little bit. There is tart citrus, there's apples and pears, and a bit of spicy oak, I would say, going on there. All right, so I'm going to take a sip of water and let's see how we got on with the Prohibition recipe. So again, the legs they're running pretty fast in this. Mouthfeel wise, I'm not going to say that this is substantially better than the original white label. But it's a little sweeter. So there's a candy floss element going on along with foam banana sweets. There's fresh peach. There's a vanilla sponge cake in there too. Again, there's pepper and cinnamon, along with some caramel. The clementine note is there again, and a little bit of spicy oak just at the end. But definitely an improved palate, I would say. Finish wise, well, I'm going to take another little sip and then we'll get into the finish. Yeah, you definitely get those foam banana sweets big style, and the vanilla sponge really comes through. I would still say that the finish is a little on the short side. I mean, just because it's non-chill filtered and it has 6% extra ABV, you're not expecting miracles here, guys, but it's definitely an improvement. So it's still short. There's apple pie, vanilla custard, warming spice, and it does just feel a little like it is a white label, better put together and a little bit more assertive and flavorful. Yeah, so before I get into my final scores and my overall thoughts, let's discuss prices. So both of these bottles actually cost me $24. Although normally this bottle, the Prohibition recipe, would be an extra $4, so it'd be $28.99, an extra $5, sorry. So that means roughly both these cost around £18 or €20.50. As I say, the original Bushmills is 40% ABV. It is chill filtered. This is 46% ABV, and it is non-chill filtered. And I'm assuming it probably is natural color, just from what's in the glass. So scores, what am I going to give them? I will give the Bushmills Original a 3 out of 10, and I'm going to score this a 5 out of 10. So my overall thoughts, why am I scoring them like this? Okay, so starting with the original, honestly, I've struggled with the original Bushmills for a number of years now. I know it is an entry-level product, and in that regard, it is still a solid enough whiskey, but a bit like Jameson, I just feel as though that neither of these are what I would say the greatest introduction to Irish whiskey. I think the Jameson is maybe a little less rough around the edges than the Bushmills. So I mean, I do think that this has a little more bite than a Jameson. I just think that neither of them are really going to excite you for the money that you're paying. It doesn't mean that they're like terrible whiskies at all. You know, compared to the likes of a Johnnie Walker Red Label, I would buy either this or the Jameson any day. But I definitely think that the non-chill filtration and the extra ABV that you get with the Prohibition Recipe definitely elevate this considerably. It just has better aromas, delivers more flavour, and it definitely for me is worth the extra $5 or £3, €3.50, something, whatever it is. Yeah, it's just more rounded as well, and a more approachable whiskey. I think the edges have been not as aggressive as this, like the grain component doesn't hit quite as hard potentially. I just think that the malt component in this shines through a little bit more. So yeah, so there you go. That is my thoughts on the Bushmills Original White Label and the Prohibition. Please like, subscribe and comment if you've tried either of these or both of them. Please, let me know your thoughts. If you agree or disagree with the scores, again, give me a comment. Next video we are back to Scotland. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I will see you again soon. Sláinte.